Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Maggie and I am into all things natural, non-toxic, pregnancy, motherhood, and life. So if you're into that, I would love for you to subscribe and stick around. Today I'm going to be answering some common questions asked around breastfeeding. But before we get started, I want to mention that I recently created a guide on 5 easy ways to optimize your fertility. In this guide, I go over what optimal fertility looks like and why this is important, as well as 5 lifestyle changes that we can make to optimize our fertility. This guide also includes over 20 tips on how to implement these lifestyle changes to optimize your fertility and your overall well-being. So if you're interested in checking out my free guide, you can go ahead and click the link below. So without further ado, let's jump into the questions. So the first question that I have here is, does it hurt? So breastfeeding can definitely be uncomfortable. A lot of people say that it shouldn't hurt. For me personally, when my son and I were learning this skill in the beginning, my nipples were a little sore because we hadn't perfected the latch. And I think that's pretty common. I don't want to speak for other women, but I feel like when you are just learning the skill and the baby's just learning the skill, learning how to get enough of the nipple in the mouth to the soft palate so that it isn't painful, I think that it can cause tender nipples. I think there's a time frame when it shouldn't hurt anymore, but I'm sure that varies from woman to woman. I'm not a lactation consultant. I just am a breastfeeding mom and have some training in breastfeeding basics. But if, it's been a couple weeks and you're still experiencing some sore nipples and some pain, you may need to seek professional help. There are also some things that you can do for the pain, like a nipple balm. So I used Earth Mama's nipple balm or nipple butter, and that butter or balm specifically has really good ingredients. It's non-toxic. I love it. You can also use silverettes, which are like little nipple covers that can relieve some of the pain, and they're kind of cooling. And I also recently found a really cool nipple balm by Texas Tallow. So it's actually made out of grass-fed beef tallow, which I'm super into. And I'll be sure to link all these things below for you. So yeah, that's my answer to does it hurt? Maybe. It probably shouldn't in the long run. If it is for an extended period of time, you should probably seek professional help. So the next question I have here is breastfeeding hard? And I'm just gonna tell you flat out, yes, breastfeeding can be difficult. I remember many days in the beginning crying because I didn't think I was gonna be able to do it. This is a new skill for you as an adult to learn, but also a new skill for your fresh, brand new baby who really hasn't learned anything else in the outside world at this point. So yeah, like I said in the last response, give yourself a little bit of grace because you are learning a new skill and your baby is learning a new skill, and there are techniques, practices, and positions that are going to take time to get the hang of and master. And yeah, it's extremely rewarding and also can be challenging. I think having preparation, like taking a breastfeeding course or reading breastfeeding books prior to actually doing it, can be really helpful. The next question I have is about a schedule. So are you on a schedule, or like what about a feeding schedule? So controversial thought warning here. I believe that schedules are not beneficial at all to babies. I think they are used for convenience of parents only. And I will explain this. So a breastfeeding schedule is essentially a schedule used that tells you how much to feed your baby, like how many ounces and how often. And what this does is it eliminates the guessing, and it eliminates the inconvenience of like randomly having to feed your baby. So no, I'm not on a breastfeeding schedule, and I've never used a schedule with my son. I decided this before we had my son, that I didn't really subscribe to the whole like feeding schedule, sleep schedule kind of thing, because it's really cool. Babies actually have cues and signals, and they communicate in their own baby way what they need. So some hunger cues of a newborn are like rooting, or like I remember when Eli was a lot younger, when he was hungry, he would actually like peck around, because the baby's actually trying to find the nipple because they're hungry. So that's a cue for being hungry. And then the other one is they'll actually like suck on their hands or put their hands in their mouth, and that's a sign of hunger. So when he was first born, we really paid attention to his cues and fed him whenever he would give us any of those signs. Another sign, if you miss the early cues, is of course crying. I remember in the beginning days, whenever he would cry, would always try to nurse him first. So this way of nursing is called breastfeeding on demand, and breastfeeding on demand is essentially following the baby's cues and signals of when they're hungry and feeding them instead of looking at the clock. And what this does is it helps establish like a really solid milk supply according to the demand of your baby. So I know a lot of women can struggle with having a good milk supply, and personally I didn't have any issues with milk supply, and I feel like a big part of that was because like I would feed my baby often. Like in the beginning I fed him a lot, and they recommend like every 2 to 4 hours or something, and we were feeding him sometimes every 30 minutes. So some pros of feeding on demand is that it helps establish a really good milk supply. It also helps create a secure attachment to your baby, just knowing that when they're hungry, they're always going to get food and not feeling like they have to wait to get food. I also feel like feeding on demand takes away some of the stress around breastfeeding. And what I mean by that is that it kind of eliminates the attachment that we create to like a schedule, like being like, oh, he should eat every 2 hours, but he's not hungry right now, or he should eat every 2 hours, but he's hungry way before. He's super fussy. I don't know why. Maybe he's hungry. So I think it eliminates some of that questioning, like the schedule, and allows more room for connecting with our intuition, which is also something that we develop in motherhood, like our mom tuition and kind of what our baby needs. But I think feeding on demand and really paying attention to your baby's cues and being present with the baby's cues is one way to be like, oh, I know what my baby needs. And I also personally noticed that my son gained a lot of his weight that he lost right after birth back really quickly, and I would say that it's because we were feeding on demand. I know a lot of women struggle with their baby not gaining their birth weight or getting back to their birth weight in the first week. And at that point, pediatricians, they will recommend like, hey, maybe breastfeeding's not going super great, you should probably use formula. And it can be really stressful if the baby doesn't gain the weight back. But personally, we didn't experience that. He actually got back to his birth weight 3 days after he was born, which is like really quick, but I give a lot of credit to just nursing on demand. And yeah, I think that nursing on demand really helped our breastfeeding journey. A side note on the formula topic, if your pediatrician is pressuring you to supplement with some other kind of milk, and you're adverse to just traditional formula because maybe the ingredients aren't the best or kind of the worst. Anyways, there are other options. Like you could get breast milk donors. So sometimes moms who have an oversupply will donate breast milk to you. You could also try using some other kind of animal's milk, or I believe there's a formula recipe in Nourishing Traditions for Baby and Child Care by Sally Fallon. But this is not advice. I would definitely consult with your pediatrician and do your own research before making this decision, and do what you feel is best for, yourself and your family. If your baby hasn't gained weight back in the time frame that your pediatrician is recommending, you could also seek a lactation consultant and see if maybe there's an issue with your milk supply or an issue with the baby's latch. There could be a tongue tie or some other issues going on there, and definitely seeking professional help and getting multiple opinions can be really beneficial in that case. So back to breastfeeding on demand. Some cons of breastfeeding on demand is that because babies' tummies are so small and breast milk is extremely absorbable, like it gets absorbed so fast, it's literally like a liquid, babies want to eat a lot. And I noticed for me, especially in the beginning, Eli was eating what felt like all the time, and this can prevent you from, being away from your baby or really like leaving your house for a certain period of time. I guess there's benefit in that because in the early postpartum days, you do want to kind of lie in and just rest and relax. And so I guess cluster feeding could be, just nature's way of saying, hey mom, like chill out and just feed your baby. But it can also seem like very taxing and can just be a lot. I noticed for me personally that breastfeeding, even though you're just like sitting there or laying there feeding your baby, it takes a lot out of you. Like you literally just created this milk out of like stuff in your body, and your baby is literally taking it from you, and you're doing that all day long. So it might not seem like a lot, like superficially, but really what's going on, it is a lot, and breastfeeding on demand can be a lot at first. At this point, 11 months later, still breastfeeding on demand, I do feel a lot more adjusted to the fact that like I'm pretty much a 24/7 milk factory, and I supply him with the good majority of his nutrients, and I am okay with that for the most part. Another con for breastfeeding on demand is you may have to breastfeed in the car. We'll get more into that a little bit later. And yeah, a big con is it may seem inconvenient, but I personally feel like breastfeeding on demand is the best thing that you can do for your milk supply, and also like just your breastfeeding journey in general. Like we've had success, and I feel like we're gonna have longevity with this journey because of like our established connection in the beginning by feeding on demand. Okay, so the next question I have is what to eat while breastfeeding. So I have a lot of notes on this one because I'm super passionate about nutrition, and I'm also certified in breastfeeding nutrition. I took a course on this, so super exciting. So what I've learned is the postpartum period is actually more depleting and nutritionally expensive than pregnancy. So just like recovering from pregnancy, labor, and birth is more nutritionally expensive. Like, you need more nutrition and nutrients than pregnancy itself, than like growing a baby. And then you add breastfeeding on top of that, and like, you need a lot if you are a breastfeeding mom. So a couple points. First point, it's really important and can seem really hard, but it's really important to prioritize eating regularly. You may be, or you may notice that you have a huge appetite, and it's really important to kind of listen to that and eat regularly. And it's also really important to prioritize eating nutrient-dense foods. So all breast milk is not created equal, despite what like the mainstream says. Like, even like the alternative mainstream, you know, that like breast milk is best or whatever. Breast milk is great, and I do believe that breast milk is the most nutrient dense food you can offer your newborn. However, the nutrient content of your breast milk is dependent on your nutrient content as a breastfeeding mother. So with that being said, it's really important to make sure that you are eating nutrient-dense foods. So I figured I'd just share what I eat as a breastfeeding mom. So I eat 5 to 6 balanced meals a day. And what these meals kind of look like are protein, carbs, and fats. So I eat roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight a day. So, and I get most of my protein from, well, I get all of my protein from nutrient-dense animal sources. And then the typical recommendations are 80 to 100 grams at least of protein. I would lean stronger towards the 100 grams. And then carbs, I eat my carbs from whole food sources like fruits and vegetables. And fats, I eat mainly saturated fats from animal sources. I also eat some monounsaturated fats and some saturated fats from coconut oil. But I try to limit polyunsaturated fats like seed oils and like peanut butter and nuts and things like that, just because those polyunsaturated fats, they can be more inflammatory, and it is shown that depending on your fat intake, it kind of creates the fat content of your breast milk. So if you are eating a higher polyunsaturated fat diet, your breast milk is going to contain more polyunsaturated fats, which can be less nutritious, but also cause inflammation for the baby. So typical foods that I enjoy and like to eat are liver, oysters, and these are what I would consider like nutrient and superfoods. I eat a lot of Parmigiano Reggiano or raw cheese. I like raw goat cheese as well. I love berries and bananas and other fruits. We eat a lot of carrots and squash. And then fat sources, we cook with olive oil, coconut oil. I get fats from meats like ground beef, chicken thighs. So yeah, that's kind of what I would eat, or what I actually do eat as a breastfeeding mom. Another important piece to the nutrition aspect is hydration, and not just like drinking water, but making sure that you are getting electrolytes and minerals. So making sure that if you have filtered water, you're remineralizing with sea salt and trace minerals. But also drinking things like bone broth and coconut water can be really hydrating, really mineralizing. And you may hear the heater just came on in the background, but we're just gonna keep going. The next question is best breastfeeding advice. So yeah, I talked a lot about breastfeeding on demand, but I highly recommend breastfeeding on demand and learning your baby's cues and what the different cries of the baby means. I would also not hesitate to seek help if you are struggling, but even if you think you're not struggling, definitely seek help just to check in and see where you're at with things. We did that a couple of times and it was really helpful. In terms of lactation consultant appointments, typically most insurance will cover a portion, if not all, the costs, so even more reason to go and seek some help. And I guess the biggest piece of advice that I have is don't give up. I know that it can be challenging, and I had multiple moments, like I said earlier, where I was like sitting there kind of crying, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But I believe that breast milk does lay like the best foundation for our child's health and gives them all the nutrition that they need. So don't give up. Seek help if you are struggling. The next question that I have is, how long am I going to breastfeed? So I initially answered this just by saying as long as my son wants, which is true. I want to breastfeed as long as he wants. And then I elaborated a little bit because the CDC guidelines, which I don't follow, but this is just like the general recommendation for breastfeeding, is breastfeeding for at least 6 months. And so I think that's the best, try for at least 6 months. And then if you get to 6 months and you really don't want to do it anymore, then stop. But, I think 6 months is like a good amount of time. Some people try to go for a year and then stop. Some people will do like 18 months. Some women will breastfeed until they want to have another baby and then they'll stop, because breastfeeding can prevent you from having a period and ovulate. So that's kind of cool, but a whole nother topic. But I would say that I'm 100% in the camp of letting my child lead the way. So I kind of will just follow him and see however long he wants to breastfeed, and if he wants to stop sooner or later or whenever, I'll be open to that. But as of right now, he's 11 months old and he currently feeds at least 3 times during the day and at least 2 to 3 times at night. And he eats 3 solid food meals of whatever we're eating. But sometimes he just needs a little bit of milk, and I'm like, okay, he comes up to me now when he wants milk and definitely makes it known that he wants some milk. We're trying to teach him the milk sign language. But yeah, I'll just pay attention to him and see how long he wants to breastfeed for. The next question is, how have your breasts changed, and is it permanent? So yes, my breasts have changed. They can become more saggy. When they're full of milk, they may look larger, like more plump. They may leak. Your areolas may get darker during pregnancy. Some people that I kind of follow on social media say that you can reverse the sagginess. I don't know, because I'm still breastfeeding. I plan on having multiple kids, so I'm not super concerned about the state of my breasts. Also, not concerned about what they look like, because I'm providing my child with nutrition, and I think that the purpose of breastfeeding is a lot greater than the superficial idea of having nice boobs. So that's my thoughts on that. The most helpful breastfeeding tools, books. Breastfeeding Made Simple by Nancy Moorbacher, and then another book is The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding by the Leche League. Also rely on your local Leche League group or Facebook group lactation consultants, support groups with other moms is great. And yeah, patience is a great tool. Yeah, practice. Practice is also a really great tool. So how to breastfeed on the go. This is not advice. I don't recommend doing this. This is just my experience. When Eli was younger, we would always pull over in the car and, you know, I would take him out of his car seat and nurse him in the car, and then we'd put him back in and go on driving. At this point, I sit in the back seat and I just lean over with my breast into his car seat and feed him, and it's very convenient. And, you know, if he's trying to nurse to sleep or something in the car, it's effective, and we don't have to stop, because Christmas, I believe, he was 3 months old and we were traveling to our family's house, and what was a 2.5 hour drive took us 5 hours because we had to stop so much and feed him. So we don't do that anymore. Definitely make sure that I'm safe when we're doing it, and try to buckle in if possible while doing it. What is cluster feeding? So this cluster feeding is when it seems like your baby is feeding all the time, because they most likely are feeding all the time. It typically happens like in the beginning, like when they're newborn, when they're trying to establish your milk supply. And it also happens around growth spurts, which I think are like 3, 6, 9, I don't even know. You can Google the growth spurts. But yeah, when they're growing and they need more milk, or they're getting bigger and they actually need to eat more volume, you know, they'll cluster feed to up your milk supply, which is like super intelligent. But yeah, it's just literally where they're eating all the time. And yeah, I also noticed that Eli cluster feeds when he's teething. It's very soothing for him. So, okay, and the last question that I have is, what about breastfeeding when they get teeth? So, you're probably going to get bitten, and it hurts really bad. You'll probably get bitten at least once, probably more than that. I don't know if there's any way to avoid the child biting you or biting your nipple when you're breastfeeding. What I do when he does it, and he's been doing it since he got teeth and still does it, not as often now, but I just calmly and firmly say, Eli, please don't biting, and I'll take him off the breast, and then, you know, I'll put him back on, and if he does it again, I'll take him off and tell him again. But I think they'll learn eventually. I hope that he'll learn and he'll stop doing it, because it does hurt, especially the more teeth that they get. So yeah, I think that's gonna happen. Breastfeeding has been a very big learning experience for me, and it's also been a place where I have to give myself some grace and just be easy on myself, because it is a skill that we have had to learn, my son and I together. And, you know, it wasn't perfect in the beginning, and I'm very much the kind of person that likes to or tries to be perfect. Working on that, whole nother thing. But yeah, it's been a beautiful journey. I love the connection that I've been able to create with my son through breastfeeding, and I also love the fact that I'm able to provide him with a like nutrient dense food source and really lay a solid foundation for his life. But yeah, these are all of my common kind of breastfeeding questions, breastfeeding Q&A stuff. If you liked this video, I would love for you to give it a thumbs up, and feel free to head over to my Instagram for similar content, and I will see you all next Friday. Thanks for watching.